Some people don't raise their voice. They don't explain themselves. They don't compete for attention. And yet, when they enter a room, something shifts. Conversations slow. Energy tightens. People feel seen without being looked at. These are not dominant personalities. They are not intimidating by force. They don't try to unsettle anyone. And that's exactly why they do. Trauma-born loners aren't formed by choice. They are shaped by environments where emotional safety was unpredictable, where connection came with cost, where observation became protection. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It learns to stay still, to watch first, to speak less, to react late. What looks like detachment is often regulation. What looks like coldness is often restraint. What looks like silence is often awareness. This kind of presence disrupts people who rely on emotional exchange to feel grounded. Most social systems depend on mirroring shared reactions, shared pacing, shared vulnerability. Trauma-born loners don't mirror automatically. Their nervous system learned that mirroring was unsafe. So when others lean in emotionally, they don't rush to meet them. When tension appears, they don't escalate. When expectations are projected, they don't perform. This creates a gap, and that gap is unsettling. People often assume power comes from confidence, charisma, or control. But there is another kind of power, one that emerges when someone is no longer pulled by emotional gravity. Not because they're superior, but because they've already survived what others are still trying to avoid. This video is not about glorifying trauma. It's not about romanticizing isolation. And it's not about turning pain into identity. It's about understanding why certain people, often the quietest, can destabilize emotional environments without saying a word. Why their calm can feel threatening. Why their presence can shake others at a level they can't explain. If you've ever felt people react strongly to your silence, if you've noticed others projecting onto you without reason, or if you've wondered why calm unsettles more than aggression, stay. If this perspective resonates, stay with the channel. Quiet power isn't about becoming unbreakable. It's about understanding what happens when you no longer need to react. Trauma-born loners are often misunderstood because people confuse silence with absence. In reality, silence is a learned position. When emotional environments become unpredictable, the nervous system adapts by reducing outward expression. Attention turns inward. Observation replaces participation. Over time, this becomes habitual. The person learns that safety is created through distance awareness and restraint. This adaptation is not conscious. It is embodied. The body learns when to speak, when to pause, and when to remain unreadable. What looks like personality is often protection shaped slowly through repeated emotional exposure across early relationships and formative social conditions over time repeatedly. Because this adaptation develops quietly, others rarely notice its origin. They respond only to the effect. A person who does not rush emotionally interrupts social rhythm. Most interactions rely on synchronized signals, reassurance, and feedback. Trauma-born loners disrupt this pattern unintentionally. Their nervous system does not mirror automatically. They wait, they listen, they stay neutral. This neutrality creates discomfort because it removes emotional reference points. Without reflection, people feel exposed, uncertain, and ungrounded. The silence becomes a psychological mirror revealing unresolved tension, expectations, and projections within relationships, conversations, workplaces, and family dynamics over time, especially under emotional pressure situations. Many mistake this effect for superiority or emotional coldness. Both interpretations miss the mechanism. Trauma-born loners are not trying to dominate or withdraw. Their nervous system learned that emotional visibility increased risk, so it optimized for minimal exposure. This produces a calm that is not performative. It is regulatory. When others escalate emotionally, the loner remains stable. Stability contrasts sharply with reactivity. Humans subconsciously seek co-regulation. When it is absent, anxiety rises. The calm becomes unsettling because it refuses to carry others' emotions or resolve conflicts on their behalf. Automatically, without consent or shared emotional pacing cues repeatedly. This reaction often triggers projection. People assign intention where none exists. Silence is interpreted as judgment, detachment, or hidden aggression. The loner becomes a screen for unresolved narratives. Trauma-heightened awareness detects subtle shifts, tone, and posture. Because they respond minimally, others fill the space with assumption. This is not manipulation. It is absence of performance. The nervous system of the loner no longer trades safety for approval. That refusal destabilizes social contracts built on emotional exchange, reciprocity, and reassurance, which many rely on unconsciously to feel secure socially in groups, relationships, workspaces, and family systems over time, repeatedly contexts. It is important to state this clearly. Trauma-born loners are not healed by isolation alone. Silence can regulate, but it can also numb. Quiet power is not withdrawal. It is choice. The unsettling quality arises only when awareness accompanies restraint. Without awareness, isolation collapses inward. With awareness, silence becomes presence. Presence is felt somatically by others. It slows conversations, alters pacing, and reduces emotional noise. People accustomed to intensity feel disoriented. Their strategies fail. They cannot provoke reassurance or dominance. They are left with themselves, which feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar after years of external regulation and emotional dependency patterns. This dynamic explains why trauma-born loners often attract intense reactions. Some people feel drawn, compelled, or curious. Others feel irritated, threatened, or rejected. The loner does nothing to create this polarity. They simply do not stabilize others' emotions. In psychological terms, they break codependency loops. The system expects mutual regulation. When it fails, anxiety surfaces. People then attempt to restore equilibrium through questioning, testing, provoking, or labeling. The loner remains steady. This steadiness is misread as power when it is simply regulation maintained internally rather than negotiated through external emotional exchange with others in social environments repeatedly present. There is also grief in this pattern. Trauma-born loners often wanted connection deeply. Withdrawal was not preference, but necessity. Over time, the nervous system forgets how to seek softly. Independence becomes default. This can look like strength, but it carries loss. The quiet does not mean absence of longing. It means longing learned not to reach. This subtle sadness is often invisible to others. They see only composure. But beneath it is sensitivity refined through survival, not choice, shaped by early relational instability and emotional unpredictability. Within formative environments where safety was inconsistent and boundaries formed silently over years. Quiet power emerges when awareness integrates with this adaptation. The loner no longer defines themselves by trauma or distance. They simply remain present. They can engage without losing center and withdraw without collapse. This balance is rare and noticeable. Others feel it immediately. There is no urgency to impress, no hunger for validation. Emotional manipulation finds no purchase. The person is not closed. They are grounded. Grounded presence creates gravity. Not attraction through performance, but stability. People sense they cannot control this calm, and that unsettles deeply because it reflects their own instability quietly, without accusation or demand for change. This is why trauma-born loners unsettle environments, not because they threaten, but because they do not participate in emotional economies. They do not trade reaction for belonging. They do not escalate to be seen. They do not collapse to be accepted. This neutrality exposes dependency in others. Systems built on stimulation, persuasion, and pressure falter. The loner becomes a point of stillness, Stillness reveals motion. And when motion is revealed, discomfort follows. People either slow down, self-regulate, or push harder. Both responses reveal the system at work within social interactions and emotional dynamics in everyday shared contexts repeatedly. This chapter is not a warning or praise. It is an explanation. Trauma-born loners are not dangerous. They are regulated. Their presence highlights what others outsource emotionally. The unsettling feeling is information. It shows where dependence lives. Quiet power does not come from trauma. It comes from awareness, meeting adaptation without identity. When the loner no longer hides or hardens, silence becomes clean. Others may still react. That is not the loner's responsibility. They are simply no longer available for unconscious emotional contracts. And that changes rooms without effort by remaining present, regulated, and self-contained in shared spaces. Trauma-born loners often develop a heightened sensitivity to emotional patterns because their survival once depended on reading environments accurately. When chaos or inconsistency exists, the nervous system sharpens perception. Small changes in tone, posture, silence, and timing become signals. Over time, this sensitivity becomes automatic. The person does not analyze consciously. They sense. This sensing operates beneath language. It is not intuition in a mystical sense. It is pattern recognition refined through exposure to emotional unpredictability and learned vigilance sustained over years until it becomes baseline awareness within daily interactions. Because of this sensitivity, trauma-born loners often see emotional strategies others are not aware they are using. They notice when someone seeks reassurance through urgency, when someone applies pressure through silence, or when someone masks insecurity with confidence. This awareness is not judgmental. It is observational. But observation without reaction is unsettling. Most people expect feedback, agreement, disagreement, reassurance, resistance. When none arrives, the strategy collapses. The person feels exposed because their unconscious behavior has nowhere to land. This exposure creates discomfort that is then attributed to the loner rather than the pattern being revealed. Many social environments depend on emotional reciprocity to function smoothly. Humor invites laughter. Vulnerability invites empathy. Authority invites compliance. Trauma-born loners interrupt these loops by responding selectively rather than reflexively. They do not refuse connection. They pause. That pause destabilizes expectation. It introduces uncertainty. Uncertainty activates anxiety. Anxiety seeks resolution. People attempt to resolve it by labeling the loner distant, arrogant, mysterious, or intense. These labels restore predictability. Once named, the unknown feels manageable again. The label becomes a defense against confronting internal emotional reliance on external validation and predictable response patterns. This is why trauma-born loners are often misunderstood in groups. Their silence is read as withdrawal or superiority. Their calm is mistaken for indifference. Their boundaries are perceived as rejection. In reality, their nervous system no longer tolerates emotional noise easily. Noise once signaled danger. So the system learned to remain quiet, alert, and grounded. This does not mean they lack empathy. It means empathy is not expressed through performance. It is expressed through presence. Presence does not announce itself. It simply remains available without urgency or demand, which confuses those accustomed to emotional bargaining. Another reason trauma-born loners unsettle others is because they do not seek hierarchy validation. Many social interactions are subtle negotiations of status, worth, and belonging. People constantly adjust themselves to be seen, accepted, or protected. Trauma-born loners stepped out of this negotiation early because it failed them. Their worth could not depend on others' reactions. So they learned to self-stabilize. This self-stabilization removes them from unspoken competitions. When someone does not compete, they cannot be placed easily. This ambiguity threatens systems that rely on comparison and ranking to maintain order and predictability within social structures. The unsettling effect intensifies in emotionally charged situations. When conflict arises, most people escalate or appease. Trauma-born loners often slow down. They do not raise their voice quickly. They do not rush to defend. They wait for clarity. This delay frustrates those seeking immediate resolution or emotional release. The loner is not withholding intentionally. Their nervous system prioritizes safety through regulation. They will not engage until the environment stabilizes. This refusal to escalate denies others the emotional payoff they unconsciously seek through conflict resolution dominance or reconciliation cycles. It is important to understand that this pattern can isolate trauma-born loners further. Being constantly projected upon creates distance. People may avoid them or approach them with suspicion. The loner senses this and may withdraw further, reinforcing the image. This cycle is not inevitable, but it is common. Without awareness, silence becomes a shield rather than a bridge. Quiet power requires integration. The loner must recognize when stillness serves presence and when it becomes avoidance. This distinction is subtle and personal. Awareness transforms survival strategy into choice rather than identity. When integration occurs, the unsettling effect changes quality. It becomes grounding rather than destabilizing. People may still feel exposed, but they also feel safer. The difference lies in intention and openness. An integrated loner can engage gently without losing center. They can speak when needed and remain silent when not. Their calm invites regulation rather than triggering anxiety. This presence feels rare because it does not demand anything. It does not need agreement or admiration. It simply exists. Many people have never experienced such non-conditional presence and react strongly because it touches unprocessed emotional dependency. Trauma-born loners also unsettle others because they are difficult to manipulate. Manipulation relies on predictable emotional responses: fear, approval, guilt, or desire. When these levers fail, the manipulator feels powerless. This powerlessness is often projected as hostility. The loner is accused of being uncooperative or difficult. In truth, they are simply not available for emotional leverage. This does not make them morally superior. It makes them less reactive. Reduced reactivity disrupts dynamics built on control, whether conscious or unconscious. This does not mean trauma-born loners should isolate themselves or distrust everyone. It means understanding the impact of their presence and taking responsibility for integration. Awareness allows them to soften without collapsing, to connect without overexposure, to remain grounded without becoming rigid. When this balance is found, their presence no longer unsettles through absence, but stabilizes through clarity. Others may still react, but the loner no longer absorbs that reaction as proof of difference or defect. Ultimately, trauma-born loners unsettle others because they reveal something fundamental. Emotional dependence is invisible until it is interrupted. Silence reveals need. Calm reveals chaos. Presence reveals absence. The reaction belongs to the system being disrupted, not the individual disrupting it unintentionally. When this is understood, the loner no longer internalizes others' discomfort. They simply remain present. Quiet power is not about impact. It is about alignment. When alignment is stable, the environment adjusts or reveals itself. And that revelation is what most people find unsettling when faced with someone who no longer needs to be emotionally managed. The most misunderstood aspect of trauma-born loners is not their silence, but their self-sufficiency. People assume independence is a preference, a personality trait, or even a statement. In reality, it is often the residue of repeated emotional disappointment. When support fails consistently, the nervous system adapts by internalizing regulation. The person learns not to reach reflexively. This creates an internal orientation that feels foreign to those who depend on constant emotional exchange to remain balanced. This internal orientation changes how relationships function around them. Trauma-born loners do not unconsciously outsource their emotional stability. They feel their feelings without immediately transferring them. They process internally before expressing externally. This pacing disrupts relational rhythms that rely on rapid reassurance, immediate feedback, or emotional escalation. Others may feel disconnected, unsure, or impatient. The discomfort arises not because something is wrong, but because the usual emotional shortcuts are unavailable. Many people unconsciously regulate themselves through others. They vent to discharge emotion. They seek agreement to stabilize belief. They provoke reaction to feel real. Trauma-born loners interrupt these processes simply by not participating automatically. This is often experienced as rejection, even when none is intended. The loner is not withholding care. They are withholding enmeshment. This distinction is subtle but critical. Enmeshment feels like closeness to those accustomed to it. Its absence feels like distance. This difference in emotional processing also affects conflict. Trauma-born loners do not escalate easily because escalation once meant danger. Their nervous system associates raised emotion with loss of safety, so they slow down when tension rises. They may go quiet, breathe, or disengage temporarily. Others interpret this as avoidance or indifference. In reality, it is regulation. The loner is choosing not to flood the system with more intensity. This restraint frustrates those who equate emotional expression with honesty or commitment. Another unsettling quality is the loner's resistance to emotional contagion. Most people unconsciously mirror the mood of their environment. Trauma-born loners learned early not to do this. Mirroring once increased vulnerability, so they learn to remain internally steady regardless of external chaos. This steadiness feels unnatural to those whose emotions fluctuate with context. It creates a sense of imbalance. People may feel overexposed in their own reactions when the loner does not match them. This resistance to contagion also affects group dynamics. In groups, emotions amplify. Excitement spreads. Anxiety escalates. Trauma-born loners often remain unaffected. They observe rather than absorb. This can dampen momentum or highlight instability. Groups may react by excluding the loner or pressuring them to participate emotionally. When participation does not increase, discomfort grows. The loner becomes a reminder that emotional intensity is not universal or required. There is also an ethical dimension to this presence. Trauma-born loners often have a low tolerance for emotional manipulation because they recognize it quickly. Guilt tactics, urgency, and exaggerated vulnerability are seen for what they are. This does not make the loner cynical. It makes them discerning. Discerning presence is threatening in environments where influence depends on emotional leverage. When leverage fails, power structures weaken. The loner is not attacking them. They are simply not available. However, this pattern carries risk. Without conscious integration, trauma-born loners can become rigid. Silence can harden into isolation. Self-sufficiency can turn into refusal. Regulation can become emotional distance. Quiet power requires flexibility. Awareness must soften the edges of adaptation. The goal is not to remain untouched, but to remain present without being consumed. This requires ongoing attention to the body, the breath, and the subtle pull toward withdrawal when connection feels uncertain. When integration is present, trauma-born loners develop a unique relational capacity. They can sit with intensity without absorbing it. They can listen without fixing. They can offer presence without performance. This is deeply regulating to others, even if initially unsettling. Over time, people feel calmer around them. Conversations slow. Emotional noise reduces. The loner becomes a stabilizing anchor rather than a disruptive force. This shift happens quietly, without explanation. The unsettling phase is often transitional. People react strongly when their usual strategies fail. Once they adjust, the relationship either deepens or dissolves. Trauma-born loners do not chase connection. They allow alignment to reveal itself. This filters relationships naturally. Those who require emotional dependency drift away. Those capable of self-regulation remain. The loner does not force this outcome. It emerges organically from presence. Importantly, trauma-born loners do not owe anyone emotional availability beyond their capacity. Their history taught them the cost of overexposure. Quiet power respects boundaries without apology. It does not justify or explain excessively. It does not overcorrect. It remains responsive rather than reactive. This self-respect can feel confronting to those accustomed to negotiating access through pressure or persistence. Ultimately, trauma-born loners unsettle others because they represent an alternative mode of being, a way of existing that does not rely on constant emotional exchange. This challenges deeply held assumptions about connection, intimacy, and belonging. Many people have never experienced a relationship not driven by need. Encountering someone who relates without grasping destabilizes those assumptions. This is not superiority. It is difference shaped by experience. When awareness integrates that difference, it becomes quiet power. Not power over others, but power within oneself. The ability to remain present, regulated, and open without surrendering stability. This presence invites others to regulate themselves. Some will, some will not. The reaction reveals the system at work. Trauma did not create this power. Adaptation did. Awareness refined it. And integration determines whether it becomes isolation or presence. Trauma-born loners unsettle others not because they intend to, but because they embody a nervous system that no longer needs emotional permission to exist. At the deepest level, trauma-born loners unsettle others because they no longer orient their identity around emotional exchange. This is the point most people miss. Humans are conditioned to locate themselves through response. Approval confirms existence. Conflict sharpens boundaries. Attention validates worth. When these signals disappear, the mind struggles to locate itself. Trauma-born loners remove these signals without intention. They do not withhold to punish. They simply no longer depend on feedback to feel real. This independence exposes a quiet truth most people avoid. Many relationships are not built on presence, but on mutual regulation. People use each other to stabilize internal states. This is not immoral. It is unconscious. Trauma-born loners learned early that this system was unreliable. Their nervous system stopped outsourcing safety. Over time, this produced an internal anchor. The anchor does not seek permission. It does not require reinforcement. It simply exists. When others encounter this anchor, their own dependence becomes visible. Without mirroring, they feel unbalanced. Without reassurance, they feel uncertain. Without emotional escalation, they feel unseen. The loner becomes a silent reference point, revealing what others lean on without realizing. This revelation is uncomfortable. People often interpret discomfort as threat. They label the loner cold, distant, intense, or intimidating. These labels protect the ego from recognizing dependency. The loner does not correct these misunderstandings. Correction would require emotional investment. Quiet power does not explain itself. It allows misunderstanding to exist without resistance. This is not arrogance. It is conservation. Trauma taught the nervous system that excessive explanation invites danger. Silence became safer than persuasion. Over time, silence became clarity. The powerful shift occurs when the loner no longer defines themselves by trauma. When adaptation is seen, not inhabited. Awareness transforms survival into choice. Silence becomes intentional. Presence becomes embodied. The loner no longer hides within quiet. They stand within it. This distinction changes everything. At this stage, the unsettling quality evolves. It becomes stabilizing. People feel calmer, even if slightly exposed. Conversations deepen or end naturally. Emotional games lose energy. Manipulation fails quietly. The loner is not confronted. They do not expose it publicly. They simply do not respond. Lack of response is not avoidance here. It is alignment. This alignment is rare. Most people oscillate between over-engagement and withdrawal. Trauma-born loners who integrate awareness move differently. They engage selectively. They withdraw consciously. They remain present regardless. This presence cannot be rushed or provoked. It does not collapse under pressure. It does not inflate under praise. It remains steady. Steadiness is unsettling in a world addicted to stimulation. Noise creates certainty. Reaction creates momentum. Stillness interrupts both. When stillness appears, people confront their own inner movement. Some slow down. Some become agitated. Some leave. The loner does not manage these reactions. They allow them. Allowing is not passive. It is grounded. This is where quiet power becomes visible without display. It is felt in the body before it is understood intellectually. People sense that emotional hooks do not work. Guilt does not land. Urgency does not spread. Fear does not infect. The loner remains human, empathetic, and responsive, but not hijacked. This distinction changes relational dynamics fundamentally. Importantly, this is not a call to isolation. Trauma-born loners are not meant to live without connection. They are meant to live without dependency. Connection becomes cleaner when need is removed. Relationships become voluntary rather than compensatory. Presence replaces performance. Silence replaces strategy. This shift also brings grief. Letting go of a long emotional bargaining can feel like loss. Many bonds dissolve when regulation is no longer exchanged. This is not failure. It is alignment asserting itself. What remains is quieter, but more stable. Fewer relationships, deeper resonance, less chaos. Trauma did not create superiority. It created sensitivity. Awareness refines sensitivity into discernment. Discernment creates boundaries that do not harden into walls. This balance is the true expression of quiet power. Not domination, not withdrawal, but self-containment. When trauma-born loners reach this stage, they no longer unsettle everyone. They unsettle only those invested in emotional control. Others feel relief. Calm invites calm. Stillness invites regulation. The loner becomes a resting point rather than a disruption. The world does not change around them. Systems continue. Noise continues. Manipulation exists. What changes is participation. The loner is no longer pulled into every current. They choose where to stand. Choice is freedom here, not escape. This is the final understanding. Trauma-born loners do not shake others because they are powerful. They shake others because they are no longer adjustable. They do not bend to emotional gravity. They do not need to be managed. They are present without permission. And presence without permission destabilizes systems built on reaction. This is not something to seek. It is something that happens when awareness meets adaptation honestly. When the nervous system no longer needs to protect identity through silence or noise. When quiet becomes home rather than shelter. At that point, the loner is no longer defined by trauma, isolation, or difference. They are defined by clarity. And clarity does not announce itself. It simply remains. If this resonated, don't rush to label yourself or anyone else. Just notice what changed in the way you listen, pause, or respond. Quiet power isn't about becoming distant. It's about becoming stable. If you want to keep exploring this level of clarity, without noise, hype, or performance, stay here.